What does Columbia Pictures have to do with the space shuttle, the Statue of Liberty, international currencies such as Brazil's, Washington, D.C., the New World Order?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The New World Order, chocolate eggs and bunnies, Easter egg hunts, colored eggs, and this holiday we call Easter. In fact, the President of the United States set aside international affairs to celebrate this pagan holiday. What would make this man and his family suspend normal activities to demonstrate that this Easter celebration is more important to less important secular activities in the office as a president? I remember being entertained as a child hunting for Easter eggs. And then my parents would talk about Jesus being resurrected, but I never did understand any correlation. Only until recently have I recognized that there is no correlation between Easter and resurrection. The following documentary is not a comprehensive work, but rather an outline to help you perceive that what happens in the world today is not what the leaders tell us, be they political, religious, Freemason, or pagan. What is depicted as fact on so-called TV news and radio news programs and in the movies is more fiction and fantasy than sitcoms and soap operas, especially the, quote, national news, unquote. Ironically, these, quote, journalistic presentations, unquote, tend to be shown at the same time as the sitcoms and the evening soap operas, and lead us to conclude that the so-called leaders like to throw this fact in our faces about the little game that they're playing. In fact, these presentations are successful attempts to deceive the people, manipulate the people, and dominate the people. An illustrative movie is Matrix. Those in government feel impelled by our authorization before they perpetrate upon us their acts of the occult. Let's begin with the origins of this Easter celebration. One of the easiest ways to deceive people is to change the names of an already existing festival. This happened with Saturnalia, the largest week of orgy of Rome, which became our Christ Mass. This happened with Christ Mass, and it also happened with Easter. Easter and Christmas are integrally connected. Many sources on the internet claim that Easter is a Christian festival or celebration commemorating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, this is just not the truth. But let me show you a few things that you may have never considered before. First, everyone has a specific day that they were born and a specific day that they die, that is commemorated. Therefore, if Easter was to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, it would be the same day every single year. But that just isn't the case. Easter is always celebrated on the first Sunday after the full moon. Why? My question to you is, what does the full moon have to do with Jesus Christ or the resurrection? Second, what do chocolate eggs and bunnies, colored eggs, grass, flowers, and spring have to do with Jesus Christ and the resurrection? And finally, how do you reconcile the southern hemisphere? For them, Easter is ushering in fall, not spring. To understand the truth behind this pagan holiday, we need to go back a little bit in history, back to the time of Noah and the flood. One of Noah's granddaughters was Semiramis. She married Cush, and they had a son, Nimrod. Nimrod was twisted and was the ultimate rebel. When the prophets told the people to multiply and spread out over the face of the earth, Nimrod got the people together to build the first recorded skyscraper, the Tower of Bab-el, which means the city of God. He became the dictator of Babylon. Unfortunately, since the prophets also told the people to worship God, the god Nimrod chose to worship was not God but Satan, and he was one of the most dedicated Luciferians of all time. In fact, he was so dedicated in his worship of Satan that he instigated the Freemason system, and he was a 33-degree Freemason. He was a megalomaniac and used Freemasonry to promote his Luciferian ideals and ideas, one of which was his desire to rule the world. Being just a dictator of Babylon was not enough. Being inspired by Satan, he wanted to implement a new world order, a fascist totalitarian world government. Nimrod was so dedicated, in fact, that he taught and trained his descendants, who were all, almost without exception, the world leadership. And this is the reason why after almost 4,000 years, the descendants of Nimrod talk about this new world order, which is not new, almost over 4,000 years old. Since their dedication to their cult worship of the occult extends beyond one generation, their manipulation in world affairs is much more difficult to perceive. Nimrod's unrestrained lust and desires knew almost no bounds, and he had sex with his mother, Semiramis, and Semiramis gave birth to Tammuz on December 25th, and nowadays everyone commemorates Tammuz's birthday by giving gifts to each other. Therefore, Christ's Mass is really celebrating Tammuz's birthday, not Jesus' birthday. Gift-giving had its rudimentary roots from this time. Easter has as its objective a celebration of the Queen Mother Semiramis, who was also the, quote, goddess, unquote, of fertility. Semiramis is the woman with the torch in Columbia Pictures. Semiramis is the woman with the torch in the Statue of Liberty, and the image of Semiramis is found in many international currencies like Brazil's. As the region of Babylon was conquered by the Phoenicians, the Assyrians, Egypt, Greece, and finally Rome, the players remained the same, but the names of the actors changed. Semiramis became Isis and Ishtar, which then turned into Aphrodite and finally Venus. Nimrod became in turn Osiris, Bacchus, and finally Zeus. Tammuz was Eros, and finally Cupid. Now there is some double meaning because of Nimrod and Semiramis' incestuous relationship. Nimrod was both Tammuz's brother and father. Semiramis caused additional confusion by claiming that Tammuz was Nimrod reincarnated. Now the most significant point is, the descendants of Nimrod and Semiramis became the current 13 ruling families of the world, what many now loosely call the Illuminati. And the Illuminati merged with the international banking cartel and formed many secret societies and so-called international think tanks. Think tank, however, is just a euphemism, for the stark reality is they do a lot more than just think. They give commands that they expect to be followed, and if they are double-crossed, they remove the leader by any means possible, for in their minds, they put the leader in power so they can take him out as well, and they have taken over the reins of almost all the nations of the world. The most notable of these international governing bodies are the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR.org, the Trilateral Commission, trilateral.org, and the Bilderberg Club, bilderbergmeetings.org. Furthermore, a quick consultation of the Bilderberg Club's webpage defines very clearly what they really are and what their purpose of existing is. They are the steering committee of the highest positions of the leadership of the world, that the, quote, presidents, prime ministers, etc., unquote, are in reality just the foot soldiers or puppets to do the bidding of those who are actually in control. Obama looks spectacular in a suit, and he reads the teleprompter very well, and it's very convincing what he says, just like any other famous actor who plays a part in a movie. But that is all he really is, just a front person, just an actor doing the bidding of his master. If you find this is difficult to believe, just consider the fact that the Illuminati, or the 13 ruling families, own over 70% of the wealth of the world, more than enough to get almost any leader to follow their command. And finally, did you notice that when Congress demanded that Obama justify his actions in his attack of Libya and Africa and other countries in the Middle East, just like a puppet, he simply stated that he was following his orders from the United Nations and told the Congress to butt out, while Noah, the other prophets, and those that followed them had their religious rituals and strove to teach their descendants. Nimrod and Semiramis were expert in indoctrinating their posterity and others of the people as well with their system of values. Besides teaching them to worship Satan, these people were taught to worship Nimrod, who through Semiramis' inculcation of the people turned him into the sun god. They were taught to worship Tammuz and were so successful that people all over the world in Christianity celebrate his birthday today, thinking that they're celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. And of course, the very same Semiramis has gotten quite a following as the moon god and the queen mother. In fact, decorating or adorning the house, such as for Christmas, decorating presents, all have their earliest beginnings with the worship of Semiramis. Semiramis was as vain as the day is long, and she loved to adorn herself with gold and jewelry and expensive things. The people were also taught to worship and revere the architecture of all these kingdoms, beginning from Babylon to Rome. Therefore, pyramids, the Eye of Horus, and other Freemason symbols abound throughout government, corporations, and institutions worldwide. Many things that were taught anciently have permeated modern language and culture. Takes, for example, the word ray. A ray of sunshine has its origins from Ra, the Egyptian sun god, who was Nimrod, and always depicted with rays of light surrounding his head. Because Nimrod was so successful as a builder, and in his Freemason rituals he incorporated principally the square and the compass, but also other tools of the trade. Nimrod and Semiramis taught their posterity, of which the majority of the current leaders are their descendants, to use their possessions and power to convince the masses to follow them. As the descendants of Noah grew, there was a division among the people, those that followed the prophets and their counsel, those that followed Nimrod's posterity, which consisted of most of the secular world leadership, and the rest were the masses, those who had lost contact and knowledge of their origins, and therefore they were easily influenced and deceived by the Luciferians. These classifications continue nowadays. So while Luciferians pity the followers of God, they still respect them to a certain degree. However, for the masses, they have total and unrestrained contempt. They consider the masses as worthless eaters, just like they were a bunch of cockroaches, because they consume the limited resources of the planet Earth that should be reserved for the governing class. These are the reasons why no attempt is made to reduce and finally eliminate poverty, sickness, genocide, and war in the world, to reduce the population of the useless eaters. Parenthetically, the money of one of the richest families of the Illuminati would house, clothe, and feed the population of the world. The Luciferian Illuminati know there's no problem of overpopulation, just a distribution of wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the question we're going to address today and lay to rest is the myth, translate, lie of overpopulation. Taking the world's population and comparing it to the world's landmass gives a very much different, much clearer picture than many so-called scientists are portraying. You need to take into consideration the world population in terms of the total landmass to put this myth of overpopulation into perspective. Anyone with rudimentary math skills and not in a fluoride-induced, IQ-reduced stupor with fundamental thinking processes intact could come up with the conclusion that I will show. Let's begin. First, let's discover a few facts. The total world landmass is 148,939,063.13 kilometers square. The current world population is approximately 7,017,000,000. There are 247.105 acres in a square kilometer. Therefore, if you were to give an acre of land to every person in the world, it would occupy only 28,396,835 square kilometers. The U.S. total landmass is 24,230 square kilometers. So in other words, total population of the world could be located in an area just slightly larger than the U.S. Second, to determine the potential limit of the Earth, we just need to multiply the total landmass, 148,939,063.13 by 247.105, which gives 36,803,587,195. Obviously, not all the landmass is inhabitable, but recognize global population is measured in billions, and the Earth's landmass potential is measured in trillions of acres. More realistically, however, we're going to take the entire population of the world and divide them up into groups of 4 that we'll call the average family. And one can consider that 25 to 50% of the family would not be self-sufficient nor self-sustaining, and therefore would need assistance from the other 2. Hence, our groupings of 4 people. Therefore, we're going to give each one of these groups 1 acre of land, taking the figure previously calculated of 28,396,835 and dividing by 4 gives us 7,099,209. Under less than ideal circumstances, this would be more than sufficient to maintain the nutritional needs of the group. Therefore, the requirements for the current world population. The landmass of Australia is 7,686,850. In other words, the entire world population could easily be situated on just over 92% of Australia, leaving the other almost 80% of Australia and the rest of the world totally empty and devoid of people. Now, getting everyone to get along with their neighbor, that's a topic for another documentary. Now, the point we're making here is that people are saying that there's overpopulation. This just isn't the truth. Now, distribution of wealth is a totally different thing. Of the 13 richest families of the world, any one of them would be able to house, clothe, and feed the entire world population. And they're the ones claiming overpopulation out of spite, out of hatred, egotism, and misanthropy. 70% of the world's wealth is in possession of 13 of the richest families. There are problems throughout the world that can be solved. Watch this clip of a known globalist and millionaire.
I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3.
Currently, to give you an idea, the Luciferians set up and acquired the music, cinematography, television, and other media industries to promote their beliefs. This is the reason why the Eye of Horus, pyramids, and other ancient symbols and references are used to deceive, persuade, and control, and are on the labels of almost all that is produced. The lyrics of songs and themes of movies, television, and sitcoms are used to move their plans forward for a fascist, totalitarian, ever-present world government, which they euphemistically call their New World Order. Listen with attention and notice their cocky arrogance. All the problems of this world and everything that is rotten, ruined, and horrible and doesn't work in the political, religious, and other systems has its origins in this Luciferian system. One of the ways that the Luciferian system uses to create virtual wealth, increase their influence worldwide, is a form of legalized fraud that started several centuries ago. During this period of time, people used gold coins as money. Because of the weight of gold, that created a problem and made it dangerous because of muggings and theft, and was extremely dangerous to travel with any large quantities. Therefore, the goldsmiths of the time, who had safe houses and the money to hire people to protect the gold, offered their services for a fee. They wrote out certificates that people started to use as money. Thus, a real value money system was gradually replaced with a virtual value or fiat money system. These certificates made it much easier and safer, but offered an opportunity for dishonest people to abuse the system. The goldsmiths of the time committed fraud by creating fraudulent and false certificates not based on any real value, and then lended these certificates charging interest as if they were real money. They were renting out virtual money, totally abusing the good faith of the people of the community. The modern banking system based on fraud, albeit legalized fraud, was born. As the goldsmiths' influence increased because of their perceived wealth, they were able to bend the laws to overlook this crime to go unpunished. They've been successful in deceiving society into believing that their fraudulent scheme should not only be permitted, but that it must be a part of society in order to survive. What the current financial system does is rent virtual money or lines of credit. To give you an idea of just how dishonest the system is, let's compare it to any other non-banking fields. Imagine a taxi driver trying to charge for a virtual trip to the airport, or an airline charging for a virtual plane ticket. The goldsmiths and their descendants intermarried with Nimrod's leaders, Freemasons, and descendants of Nimrod. They weren't satisfied with their filthy lucre. First, they started renting virtual money to large corporations, and then finally to countries. Countries offer greater security on paying the rent on the virtual money, which they called interest. An interesting thing that they discovered was during financial crisis, and especially during a war, the leaders were willing to pay any kind of price they were charged. As a consequence of this discovery, the international banking cartel, in cahoots with or domineering Nimrod's leaders, using their influence to manipulate the countries into wars and cause so-called financial crises, with the prime directive being to increase profits. This current banking system, with a large private bank, euphemistically called a central bank, which has the private interests of the banks in mind, with absolutely no concern of the country, the leadership, and especially not the masses, the cockroaches. They positioned themselves between the leadership and the lesser national banks and became the de facto virtual treasurers in each respective country. They managed this by printing out the country's physical money and authorizing virtual money to the lesser banks. At a cost, of course. Therefore, they were able to control the country and consequently the lives of the masses. And furthermore, they hijacked the governments of the respective countries, not controlled by one of Nimrod's descendants, and replaced the legitimate leaders with puppets, actors, and teleprompter leaders. This was not enough. They used their control of music, movies, television, and all forms of the media to keep the masses distracted so they wouldn't rise up against the illegitimate government. Nevertheless, not only do they use the media, but they also use sports and sports events to further distract the people, such as the Olympics, Super Bowl, etc. This is an old concept that comes from Rome, panem et circenses. Now, how much time is used to memorize important quote-unquote stats about players, games, etc.? How many people are so addicted that they rush home in order to watch the game? And the real game is that Nimrod's leaders are convincing the addicts that their next fix of sports is necessary. But their spheres of influence don't end there. They use science to further manipulate the masses, performing experiments such as putting fluoride into the drinking water of as many countries as they can. Take a look at something very interesting about the NASA logo. Up until 1958, it looked like this, representing the Eye of Horus with the backwards R of Ra. Then it was significantly changed, but the Luciferian attributes continued with the Eye of Horus and the backwards R of Ra. As stated previously, the purpose of this documentary is to get you to start paying attention, really paying attention to what is really happening with both eyes wide open. Take, for example, the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. The C stands for Columbia, which has reference to Semiramis. The layout of Washington was made to resemble the interior of the Egyptian pyramids, one of the greatest occult symbols, complete with upside-down hexagram. Washington is replete with hundreds, if not thousands, of Freemason references to ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman architecture, geometry, and images. Obelisks, owls, and sculptures of the occult abound. Other countries' capitals also were constructed to copy ancient Egyptian and Babylonian cities. Take, for example, Brasilia, capital of Brazil, was a graphic relief of Akhenaton of ancient Egypt. Now, I realize that I am challenging many of your basic belief structures and perhaps making you feel very uncomfortable. However, trust me, I've been there and felt that too. And the thing that is probably most disturbing is it all makes sense. Much more so than the solutions and explanations given by Nimrod's leaders, lying leaders. This is a lot of information, I know. What can you do about this? First, post this in your Facebook and Twitter. There is safety in numbers. The greater the number of people who know about this, the better for the world it is. The global elite, Nimrod's leaders, are the real cockroaches. They flee from the light, and until recently they have only come out when it was dark. After all these years of world oppression, the vermin are coming out into the light, much less afraid of the masses. Second, download the documentary so you won't lose access in case your connection to the internet is severed, so you can forward it to other people, because Nimrod's leaders are working to control the internet and suppress the work of those who are awake and aware. I hereby authorize you to distribute this freely, recognizing that its original format is maintained. Third, analyze everything. Assume nothing, and don't accept anything at face value, including this documentary. Do your own research and put this as a priority. We don't know how long we'll have to access the internet. Write the politicians, email the politicians, use Twitter and Facebook to fight any move to control the internet. Learn other languages. check out follyinglesia.com. It is possible to learn to communicate in a foreign language in as little as 50 hours using Excellent Global. Nimrod was impeded by God because of languages. Thus, Bab-el, what they called the city of God, lowercase god, turned into Bab-el, confused tongues. English, however, has turned into New World Order language. Old obstacle overcome. Beware, because the Luciferians are loose. Learn more about the Federal Reserve and help dismantle this bloodsucker. Please note, the Federal Reserve's charter expires December 26, 2013, and those in charge of this blood-sucking organization will stop at nothing to make sure this charter is renewed. Tell the politicians, no more bank bailouts. Period. The international banks caused the crisis and then demand more money. Tell them no one is too big to fail. Tell your politicians to stop sending taxpayer money to the IMF and other international banks controlled by the international banking cartel. Let's tell Congress that the Federal Reserve, a private central bank, has outlasted its usefulness by over 100 years. And any politician who helps to reinstate the central bank's charter will be committing political suicide. Write to your politicians. Tell them it is time for Congress to print our money, not a private bank. And if anyone says, oh, Congress can't be trusted, look them straight in the face and say, can Congress be more irresponsible than the private bank called the Federal Reserve that has embezzled $30 trillion just within the last decade? We trust Congress to take our tax money and invest it. Just the fact of being able to eliminate the IRS would be worth all the risk of having the Congress print our money. Furthermore, recognize what you have in your bank account and in your wallet is not real money, but only a promise to pay. Your bank could go bankrupt at any time and all your virtual money, which never existed, would be gone. Finally, remember, I am not an authority on all these topics, but I've done my own research, and the purpose of this documentary is to encourage you to do your own research too, and then share it like I have done and will continue to do so. One of my sources is the Corbett Report. Check out his internet channel. Another source is the Alex Jones channel. Make sure you get your news from as many independent sources of information as time will allow. And always consider who's paying the bill for the news, because what can be seen on Nimrod's media is what is shown is what is paid to be shown. Oh, now one more thing. I've been vegan for almost 2 decades, and I've seen the benefits. Remember, cockroaches can be capped by offering them sweet poisons. Since the global elite consider us as cockroaches, watch out for when they offer us sweet poisons to trap us. They're employing hundreds of scientists worldwide to do research on how they can entrap us, using our natural, human, biological urges and desires, and our body's cravings to have nutritious food. By serving the population nutritionless food, they increase obesity. They spike our food with lots of salt and fat to trick our bodies into thinking that they are getting nutrition. Beware of artificial food, substances that look like food with artificial sweeteners, artificial colors, artificial flavors, artificial food, those that have been altered chemically, and even though they look like the real thing, they really aren't anymore. Beware of the artificial food peddler. Be extremely leery of things like drugs of all kinds, tobacco, alcohol, coffee, teas, products derived from animals such as meat. And yes, fish is meat, and milk and its derivatives. Reduce your consumption of animal products if you can't get rid of them totally, and increase your consumption of more fresh organic vegetables and fruits. Even if they're not organic, just the fact that they're vegetable have multiple benefits. Remember, the best way to cure disease, prevent it from happening in the first place. One of the best ways of doing this is keeping your body alkaline. Do research on that too. By taking half a teaspoon of bicarbonate every day will keep your metabolism alkaline. It will prolong your life and can prevent multiple diseases. Be well, be safe, be good, be happy.
For delicious vegan recipes, nutritional information, and tips on making the transition to a plant-based diet, please visit chooseveg.com.